Lindsey Graham, once regarded as a rising star in the Republican Party, has seen a sharp decline in her political career, raising concerns about the causes of this change. Due to his changing positions on important topics and his turbulent relationship with President Donald Trump, he is being closely watched. The senator is currently dealing with a great deal of personal loss, though, as a result of a deeper tragedy that lurks beyond the public image. Come delve into the disturbing details of Lindsey Graham's deterioration and learn the tragic backstory. Let's start with his early years to get a better understanding of his hardships. Early days. Born in Central, South Carolina, Lindsey Olin Graham was the daughter of Millie Walters and Florence James F.J. Graham, who owned and operated the Sanitary Cafe, a restaurant, bar, pool hall, and liquor shop. He is descended from Scots-Irish ancestry. Following his graduation from D.W. Daniel High School, Graham joined the Reserve Officers Training Corps, becoming the first member of his family to attend college. Graham's mother, who was just 52, passed away from Hodgkin's cancer when he was 21 years old. At the age of 69, his father died of a heart attack 15 months later. After serving in the military, Graham was able to attend the University of South Carolina in Columbia, staying near his home as her legal guardian while taking care of his 13-year-old sister. In college, he became a member of the social fraternity Pi Kappa Phi. In 1977, Graham graduated from the University of South Carolina with a Bachelor of Arts in Psychology. In 1981, he obtained his Juris Doctor from the University of South Carolina School of Law. After graduating from law school, Graham started his military career in 1982 when he was commissioned as an officer in the U.S. Air Force's Judge Advocate General's Corps, JAG Corps. He began his Air Force career as a defense lawyer before being sent to Rhein-Main Air Base in Frankfurt, Germany. He was the head prosecutor for the Air Force in Europe from 1984 until 1988. Graham was featured in a 60 Minutes program in 1984 that revealed problems with the Air Force's drug testing practices while defending an Air Force pilot who was suspected of using marijuana. He returned to South Carolina after his service in Europe, and in 1989 he left active military to start a private practice. From 1988 to 1992, he was Oconee County's assistant county attorney. From 1990 to 1994, he was Central's city attorney. After serving in the Air Force, Graham joined the South Carolina Air National Guard in 1989 and stayed there until 1995, when he transferred to the U.S. Air Force Reserve. Graham was called back to active duty during the Gulf War, where he worked as a judge advocate at McEntire Air National Guard Station in Eastover, South Carolina. In this capacity, he educated pilots on the laws governing warfare. The Hill, a daily newspaper on Capitol Hill, reported in 1998 that Graham was presenting himself on his website as a veteran of Operation Desert Shield and Desert Storm. Graham clarified, "I have not told anyone I am a combatant. I'm not a war hero, and I never claimed to be one. If I lied about my military record, I'm not fit to serve in Congress," he said, emphasizing that he never deployed. He was promoted to lieutenant colonel in 1998, and in 2004, he received the rank of colonel in the United States Air Force Reserve during a ceremony at the White House led by President George W. Bush. That same year, a lower court ruled that Graham's service as a military judge while in the Senate was legal. However, in 2006, the Court of Appeals for the Armed Forces overruled this ruling, finding it was unsuitable for him to operate as a military judge. Graham served as a reserve in Iraq in 2007, first briefly in April and then for 2 weeks in August, when he concentrated on prisoner and rule of law concerns. In addition, during the August 2009 Senate break, he served in Afghanistan. He was then appointed a senior instructor at the Judge Advocate General School, although he did not attend. Graham received a Bronze Star Medal in 2014 for his outstanding work managing the custody of military prisoners while serving as a senior legal counsel to the Air Force in Iraq and Afghanistan from August 2009 to July 2014. Having served for almost 33 years, he reached the required retirement age of 60 for his job and retired in 2015 as a colonel. Despite earning points towards a military pension, he was not paid as an Air Force officer while serving as a senator and congressman since he was not eligible for military pay while working for the federal government. He did not, however, foresee the sudden turn his life would take. Serving in the U.S. House of Representatives. In 1994, Democratic Congressman Butler Derrick, who had served for 20 years in the 3rd Congressional District of South Carolina, announced his retirement. With Republican Senator Strom Thurmond's support, Graham entered the contest to succeed him and defeated Ed Allgood, 15%, and Bob Cantrell, 33%, to win the Republican primary with 52% of the vote. In the main election, he defeated Democratic State Senator James Bryan Jr., receiving 60% of the vote to Bryan's 40%. Graham's win made him the first Republican to occupy the position since the Republican Revolution of 1877. Graham was challenged in 1996 by Debbie Dorn, the niece of Butler Derrick and the daughter of 13-term former Congressman William Jennings Bryan Dorn. Graham defeated Dorn by 60% of the vote to 40%, and he was re-elected. For his third term in 1998, he faced no opposition. With a commanding 68% to 30% victory over Democratic opponent George Breitharp in 2000, he was able to secure a fourth term. But the most notable aspect of his political career was his contentious partnership with Donald Trump. Controversial relationship with Donald Trump. Lindsey Graham's relationship with Donald Trump changed significantly throughout the 2016 presidential campaign. He was among Trump's harshest detractors at first, calling him a jackass when Trump made fun of Senator John McCain. When Trump made Graham's personal phone number public, their dispute grew more intense. When Trump suggested banning Muslims, Graham's contempt for him grew, and he was called a race-baiting, xenophobic, religious bigot. Graham eventually turned out to be one of Trump's most loyal supporters in the Senate, despite his adamant opposition and his forecast that Trump would harm the Republican Party. In the November presidential election, Graham declined to support Trump, saying, "I couldn't go where Donald Trump wanted to take the USA and GOP." He supported Evan McMullin, an independent, instead. Graham met with Trump in March of 2017 and said the meeting went extremely well. In a reference to their 2015 disagreement, he even gave Trump his new phone number. Graham said he enjoyed their first golf outing with Trump, and by October 2017, the two had played together multiple times. The media's portrayal of Trump was criticized by him in November 2017. He said, "What concerns me about the American press is this endless attempt to label the guy some kind of kook not fit to be president." It was a significant change from his previous comments in February 2016, when he referred to Trump as a kook, crazy, and unfit for office. Graham declared in April 2018 that he would back Trump's re-election in 2020. He emphasized the significance of Republican support for Trump's initiatives by January 2019, saying, "If we undercut the president, that's the end of his presidency and the end of our party." In an interview with Graham for the New York Times Magazine in February 2019, Mark Leibovich inquired about his ascent to prominence as a Trump supporter. In an attempt to be relevant, Graham said, "I have an opportunity up here working with the president to secure some positive outcomes for the country. Never in my life have I had so many calls from a president. I've made requests of him, and he's asked me to perform specific things." He said that he was gaining power alongside Trump and sought to enter Trump's inner circle in order to rival Melania Trump, Ivanka Trump, and Jared Kushner in terms of influence. "I personally like him," Graham said, characterizing his relationship with Trump as cordial. "Our game is golf. He is so kind to me." He felt he would have a better chance of winning re-election to the Senate in 2020 if he remained close to Trump. Graham addressed criticism that he did not defend John McCain when Trump attacked him, explaining that those who were interrogating him were motivated more by hate for Trump than by real concern for McCain. Instead of undermining President Trump in McCain's honor, he made it clear that his top priority was to back him. Despite the conflict between McCain and Trump, he disclosed that he had invited Ivanka Trump to attend McCain's burial and mentioned that Trump had called to compliment his Senate memorial to McCain. On May 14, 2019, Senator Joe Manchin was among those who criticized Graham for telling Donald Trump Jr. to disregard a Senate Intelligence Committee subpoena. Lindsey Graham supported Trump in July 2019, saying he did not think the president was racist, even though Trump had made contentious remarks that some Democratic congresswomen should go back to their countries. A Somali refugee would not be asked to leave, Graham contended, provided they backed Trump. He had previously asserted in a 2018 statement that he had never heard Trump use racist language. Graham, on the other hand, warned that Trump's decision to remove American forces from Syria in October 2019 endangered both the nation and his presidency. Senator Lindsey Graham insisted that Trump should not concede, despite the fact that major news networks concluded that Joe Biden would win the 2020 U.S. presidential election. He maintained that there would never be another Republican president if Republicans did not contest and alter the electoral system. Graham disclosed that he gave $500,000 to Trump's legal defense in several states and recommended that Republican state lawmakers think about nullifying election outcomes because of purported corruption. When electors were chosen to support Trump, following Richard Hopkins's claims that his postmaster had discussed backdating mail ballots, a Pennsylvania postal worker, Graham demanded that all plausible reports of voting anomalies be looked into. Hopkins then withdrew his declaration, claiming that he had not heard his postmaster talk about backdating ballots and that it had been created for him by the conservative group Project Veritas. Graham asked Republican Secretary of State Brad Raffensperger in private during Georgia's recount process if he could reject all mail-in votes from counties with serious signature issues. Raffensperger took Graham's statement as an attempt to throw out legitimately cast ballots, and he confirmed it with a Republican election official on the call. Graham admitted that he had phoned Raffensperger to talk about preserving the integrity of mail-in voting, but he denied making such a suggestion. As part of a criminal investigation into any attempts to unlawfully change Georgia's election results, the district attorney for Fulton County is presently looking into Graham's phone conversation. Senator Graham's vote was not guilty. During Donald Trump's second impeachment suit, he was against the January 6 Commission's creation on May 28, 2021. According to an August 2021 New York Times story, Graham contacted President Biden to try to patch things up following the election. According to reports, he informed Biden that his demands for an inquiry into Biden's son, Hunter, during the campaign were made only to please Trump supporters in his own district. Graham's representative refuted this report, though. Graham went to Trump's first primetime campaign rally in 2023 and promised his support, saying he was aware of what to anticipate from Trump, particularly in regards to foreign affairs. Let's examine the roles he has played in order to comprehend his influence on politics. His political views. Tea Party critics have characterized Graham as a moderate Republican. Nonetheless, Graham considers himself a Reagan-style Republican, and is typically seen as a conservative Republican who also exhibits a modicum of independence and moderation. His willingness to work with Democrats on matters like immigration reform, tax reform, and climate change is criticized by many Tea Party members. Additionally, they don't share his belief that candidates for the judiciary should be judged only on their philosophical stances. Graham voted in favor of confirming Sonia Sotomayor and Elena Kagan, two of President Obama's candidates for the Supreme Court. In his support of a more inclusive Republican Party, he has also clashed with the Tea Party. The Lugar Center and Georgetown's McCourt School of Public Policy recognized Graham as the sixth most bipartisan senator in the first session of the 115th Congress. After Justice Antonin Scalia's death in 2016, Obama nominated Merrick Garland to the Supreme Court, but Republican senators refused to consider his appointment. According to Graham, it is not appropriate to replace Supreme Court vacancies in a year when there is a presidential election. He noted that the acts of Republicans are creating a precedent. Graham also admitted that his own statements might be used against him in the future if a similar circumstance occurred. Later, in an interview in October 2018, he explained that they would wait until after the next election if a vacancy arose in the final year of President Trump's tenure and the primary process had already started. Graham was adamantly against postponing the confirmation hearings because to Christine Blasey Ford's accusations during Brett Kavanaugh's 2018 candidacy to the Supreme Court. According to Ford, Kavanaugh had raped her in high school many years ago. Following the Senate Judiciary Committee's questioning of Ford, Graham said he didn't believe her story and didn't think Kavanaugh was the one who attacked her. Graham supported Kavanaugh, claiming that he had been treated unfairly. When he spoke before the committee the next day, "I have never seen such a corrupt and unfair political situation in my life," he said, warning Kavanaugh not to expect a fair process in that setting. One CNN analyst compared Graham's statement to a possible tryout for the Attorney General position. Graham assumed leadership of the Judiciary Committee in 2019. If a vacancy occurred before the November election, the Senate would seek to confirm a new Supreme Court judge, he said in May 2020, adding that Merrick Garland's case was special. The president of one party was nominating while the other party controlled the Senate. The dynamic would change if both sides were present. Following Kavanaugh's confirmation, Graham stated in August 2020 that his opinions had changed. When Justice Ruth Bader Ginsburg of the Supreme Court passed away in September 2020, Graham immediately stated that he supported the Senate voting on Trump's replacement right away. According to the New York Times, Graham has totally changed his mind about his previous stance. Graham clarified that before his 2016 promise, Democrats had amended Senate rules in 2013 to permit nominations to U.S. Courts of Appeals to be made by a simple majority vote. When Senator Graham appeared on Face the Nation on April 3, 2011, he suggested that Congress take formal action in response to Florida preacher Terry Jones's Quran burning, which sparked an attack on UN staff. He made the case that, similar to the restrictions put in place during World War II, it might be necessary to restrict some types of free expression in order to avoid inciting the enemy during a time of war. Graham was a member of the Gang of 14, a group of senators who mediated an agreement to break the impasse over judicial candidates in May 2005. Because of this deal, Democrats could only filibuster in extreme cases, which finally resulted in votes on 3 conservative candidates for the appellate court. Graham expressed support for the gathering of phone records in reaction to the 2013 disclosures of the National Security Agency's worldwide surveillance program, saying he had no reservations because the government was only pursuing known terrorist phone numbers. Graham was successful in introducing an amendment to the fiscal year 2014 Department of State Appropriations Bill on July 25, 2013, which demanded sanctions against any nation that helped former NSA contractor Edward Snowden obtain refuge, interrogations of detainees and reform of immigration. As early as 2003, senior military attorneys expressed reservations about the legality of questioning Guantanamo Bay detainees. Graham declassified and made public these papers in July 2005. When they say, "I want my lawyer," you tell them, "Shut up. You don't get an attorney," Graham said at a Senate hearing. "Since you are a combatant for the enemy, we will discuss with you why you joined Al-Qaeda." Graham responded by writing an amendment to the Department of Defense Authorization Act that clarified the power of American courts in the wake of the Supreme Court's ruling permitting detainees to challenge their detentions through habeas corpus petitions. The amendment was passed by the Senate in November 2005 by a vote of 49 to 42, despite opposition from human rights organizations and legal experts who said that it limited the rights of detainees. Graham has stressed that he amended the DoD Authorization Act to give military solicitors, not attorney-appointed politicians, a more autonomous role in monitoring military leaders. He has maintained that 2 major contributing elements to the crises surrounding the mistreatment of detainees at Guantanamo Bay and Abu Ghraib were the absence of control and the troops' misunderstanding of legal bounds. Graham criticized the Bush administration for not taking the Geneva Convention and the Uniform Code of Military Justice into account when deciding how to handle captives at Guantanamo Bay, despite the fact that military attorneys had long followed these rules. In order to stop future abuses of detainees, he contended that there should be more judicial scrutiny inside the military command system. In the Hamdan v. Rumsfeld case, Graham filed an amicus brief with Senator John Keel, arguing that Congress was aware that the Detainee Treatment Act of 2005 would essentially prevent the Supreme Court from considering pending cases, including this one, brought by Guantanamo inmates. Graham brought up the domestic incarceration of Japanese and German prisoners of war in the United States during World War II in an interview with CNN in May 2009. "We had 450,000 Japanese and German prisoners housed in the United States during World War II, he said, implying that the country's treatment of Guantanamo inmates may be influenced by this historical precedence. "As a nation, we can handle this." According to reports, Graham backed both S. 1348, the Comprehensive Immigration Reform Act of 2007, and S. 2611, the McCain-Kennedy Immigration Reform Bill of 2006. Conservative groups apparently took issue with his immigration policies, especially his cooperation with Senator Ted Kennedy. In 2008, conservative political groups supported a primary challenge from veteran RNC member Buddy Witherspoon, but Graham won the nomination by a significant margin. He started working with New York Democratic Senator Chuck Schumer on immigration reform in early 2010, but the discussions eventually came to a standstill later that year. Graham proposed an amendment in July 2010 to clarify that children born to illegal immigrants in the United States would not automatically be granted citizenship, arguing that the 14th Amendment should be amended to redefine citizenship. He added that half the children born in hospitals along our borders are the children of illegal immigrants. In November 2012, Graham and Schumer reportedly renewed their talks on comprehensive immigration reform. 8 senators from both parties, including Graham, were said to have outlined their principles for comprehensive immigration reform on January 28, 2013. Graham reportedly voiced optimism that the Senate was getting close to 70 votes to approve the reform package by June 23, 2013. Graham put out new immigration legislation in May 2019 with the goal of facilitating the process for individuals to seek asylum alone from Mexico or their home countries, along with extending the time that migrant children might be detained from 20 to 100 days. His proposal aimed to streamline the deportation procedure for unaccompanied minors to Central America. In July 2019, Graham went to a migrant detention center in Texas and called it an overwhelmed facility instead of a concentration camp. He said of the migrants, "I don't care if they have to stay in these facilities for 400 days, and added, "We will not release those men I saw. That would be dangerous." In addition to these immigration concerns, Graham has supported a number of causes he has supported. According to reports, Graham resisted legislation in May 2018 that sought to overturn the FCC's decision and restore net neutrality. Additionally, he backed the broadband consumer privacy proposal in March 2017, which repealed the FCC's previous internet privacy regulations and permitted internet service providers to sell users' browser data without their consent. The Earn IT Act, a piece of bipartisan legislation presented in February 2022 by Senators Lindsey Graham and Richard Blumenthal, aims to incentivize internet companies to remove child exploitation-related content from their platforms. The goal of this act was also to eliminate the general immunity for breaking laws against online child pornography. Graham is against expanding background checks, saying that universal gun registration will necessitate universal background checks. Broken, he said, citing an example where a woman who had previously entered a guilty plea to trying to assassinate President George W. Bush on the grounds of insanity was permitted to buy a pistol after passing a background check. In order to address this problem, Graham, along with Senators Jeff Flake, Mark Begich, and Mark Pryor, introduced a bill in March 2013 that would close loopholes by identifying gun purchasers who have previously filed an insanity defense, been judged dangerous by a court, or been ordered to undergo mental health treatment. The bill did not, however, address the gun show omission. Graham joined 10 other Republican senators in 2022 in supporting a bipartisan gun control agreement that included funding for school safety resources, support for state crisis intervention orders, red flag laws, stricter background checks for those under 21, and penalties for straw purchases. Graham criticized President Obama's health reform efforts and voted against the Affordable Care Act, also known as Obamacare, and the Health Care and Education Reconciliation Act of 2010. He is credited with writing the Graham-Cassidy Amendment and playing a significant part in the Republican drive to repeal Obamacare in 2017. States would have been able to remove protections for people with pre-existing conditions under this amendment, which might have allowed insurers to raise their rates. According to reports, Graham was also a co-sponsor of the Healthy Americans Act. Senator Paul said he had heard of many tragic cases of walking, talking, normal children who wound up with profound mental disorders after vaccines. Graham criticized Paul for this allegation. Paul, Graham retorted, was creating anxiety for no good reason, and looking at this issue through a libertarian's eyes, not a physician's. Graham allegedly supported the Pain-Capable Unborn Child Protection Act in the Senate in 2015. The act sought to outlaw abortions after 20 weeks of pregnancy worldwide, with the exception of situations involving rape, incest, or maternal death. Despite his opposition to abortion in 2018, Graham insisted that Roe v. Wade should not be reversed without good reason. In 2020, 13 Republican senators, including him, declined to sign an amicus brief urging the Supreme Court to reverse Roe v. Wade. Every state will decide if abortion is legal and under what conditions, Graham stated in May 2022, highlighting that this would be the most constitutionally sound course of action, mirroring how the United States handled the matter before 1973. He claimed that by June 2022, nothing in the Constitution grants the federal government the authority to regulate abortion. This was the view held by all conservatives. In 2020, he was one of 13 Republican senators who declined to sign an amicus brief calling on the Supreme Court to reverse Roe v. Wade. Graham stated in May 2022 that every state will decide if abortion is legal and under what conditions, highlighting that this would be the most constitutionally sound course of action, mirroring how the United States handled the matter before 1973. In June 2022, he said that all conservatives held the view that nothing in the Constitution grants the federal government the authority to regulate abortion. A long-term U.S. presence in Afghanistan, according to Graham, would help both countries by giving Afghan security forces a military edge to stop the Taliban from returning and by offering the U.S. daily intelligence on the situation in the area. He also said that while Iran and some of its allies are against a long-term U.S. military commitment, Afghan officials, however, are in favor of it. Graham vehemently opposed Joe Biden's proposal to remove all American forces from Afghanistan, claiming that doing so may set the country up for attack. The Taliban immediately advanced in front of the faltering Afghan armed forces as the troop pullout began, launching an offensive against the Afghan government. On July 8, 2021, Graham called President Biden's choice a disaster in the making. Prior to this, on November 6, 2010, he declared, "If we're not smart enough to work with the Iraqis to maintain 10,000 to 15,000 American troops in Iraq by 2012, Iraq could go to hell," highlighting his support for a U.S. military presence in the country, and calling for an immediate military strike to damage the Iranian government. A humorous remark made by Graham on Fox and Friends was that it would be terrible if a DNA test showed that he was Iranian. After co-host Brian Kilmeade made a comment about Iranians, he said, "Well, they have great people, just bad leaders." The National Iranian American Council's president and a number of well-known Iranian Americans criticized his remarks. Graham urged the U.S. to think about endangering Iran's oil infrastructure in the event that the Israel-Hamas conflict worsened in 2023. He called for Israel and the United States to destroy Iran in an interview with CNN, despite the fact that Iran had nothing to do with Hamas attacks on Israel. The United States would prevail in a war with Iran, he declared with confidence. In December 2010, Graham was one of 26 senators who voted against the United States and Russia's Nuclear Armaments Reduction Agreement, New START, being ratified. This deal restores on-site inspections that had been discontinued when the previous START treaty concluded, and it restricts both countries to a maximum of 1,550 strategic warheads and 700 launchers over the following 7 years. In August 2011, Graham was a co-sponsor of a resolution that deemed Russia's 2008 invasion of Georgian land an act of aggression against all rising democracies, not just Georgia. On July 16, 2013, he said that because of the Russian government's actions around the world, the United States might think about boycotting the 2014 Winter Olympics in Sochi, Russia.